Welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson over there, discussing kind of the rundown of yesterday from Matt Rhule's signing day press conference. I can't recall that much ground being covered in a signing day press conference that was just not related to signing day. We got some handshake talk right out of the chute. Some coaching talk. What else did we get? What else am I forgetting? It was like all over the place.
We got revenue sharing talk, portal aggression talk. A little like, what do you think of Malcolm Simpson as a prospect talk? I mean, it was all, I asked that one so I can make fun of my own question. But yeah, I mean, it did feel like you needed to occasionally sprinkle in hey, what about this recruit that just signed? Because usually that's what the day's been about. Not as much this day for understandable reasons. There's been a lot going on. And I do appreciate that Matt Rhule recognized it. It wasn't going to be your normal one where you had to have like an awkward, 10 minutes of questions just about recruits. And then someone's like, oh, I know this is off the topic of recruits, but who's your defensive coordinator going to be for the bowl game? So we got right to that, and you're right. They got right to the handshake thing too. And the Iowa law enforcement protecting the Hawkeye logo at midfield.
That happened like 5 weeks ago. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Too, by the way,
seem like it. Yeah.
Like that was back before everybody was getting pepper sprayed after games. That was when Nebraska still had a defensive coordinator, a defensive line coach, a different wide receivers coach, and that was even before we knew what Dana Holgorsen was going to do. That was the first time we talked to him about that. So where do you want to go? This is kind of like a choose your own adventure podcast. I'll let you decide.
Let's go with let's just start with the John Butler and like the defensive coordinator thing, because that was, a big topic. I don't think it was a shock that right now Butler's I guess you'd say the interim DC as they do bowl prep, and sounded like it was a real easy decision for Rhule to hand him the keys to that for now. He said he's had a lot of interest in that job, even from, he said, sitting power conference coordinators. And the other thing that didn't surprise me, because Rhule has said this before, but he doubled and tripled and quadrupled down on Nebraska will play good defense. He was making the point throughout that press conference, like, I've had 5 defensive line coaches under my watch, and Terrence Knighton's a good coach. Looks like he's going to Florida State. But, we've produced guys before him that have gotten into the league and will do it again. And there was definitely that tone that he wanted to set. The defense is going to be fine. It's always been fine when I've been a head coach. He said, we will have a great defensive coordinator, no matter who that may be. And the offense is going to be better along with that. So he really wanted to drive that point home. I do think, people can get tired sometimes of a guy who's like a good spokesperson, because at some point they're like, okay, I've heard all that. But Rhule is good in these settings where it feels like it's sort of a crisis week or a mini crisis week. Like, when Trev Alberts left, for instance, he came in and kind of calmed the waters. I do think he was effective at getting across a lot of bullet points, which at least kind of, for the moment, said, hey, we're going to be fine. And maybe got some people off the ledge a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the message. I know we're not going to talk a ton about recruiting, but that was kind of his message to recruits too. I mean, you see all these guys hit the portal. You see the defensive coordinator leave, a popular defensive line coach leave. And that was his message, I think, that was well received by Nebraska's recruits, is like, look, yes, Tony White's a great coordinator, but Nebraska, Matt Rhule's teams have always played solid defense, and that's not going to change. So it's a little like Jordan Belfort, the show goes on kind of a thing. But I do think that was kind of the the effective thing that they did with Nebraska's incoming recruits who signed. And, it's, I don't know. I mean, it did feel a little crisisy this week. And it's funny. I mean, we'll talk about portal, but I mean, guys are going to leave. Guys have to leave. But the volume of guys that left right on the heels of the coaching news, it
Mm-hmm.
kind of felt like that ball was rolling down the hill a little bit faster just because of the way things happen.
Yeah, don't you think a big part of people, I don't know that people are panicked, but concern was a lot of it came from like one position group. Like you kind of heard the T Knighton rumblings, and then that cleared up like many people thought it would on Wednesday, conveniently right as all the signatures had come in.
They still had him on the show talking about the recruits, though. It was pre-recorded. But,
yeah.
There's that.
Yeah, so that was kind of a wild situation with that. But I do think part of it's because of like you obviously got to be good in the trenches in this league, and so you see Jamari Butler and James Williams and Vincent Jackson was a guy who was getting some reps, and I'm leaving people off there, but there was like another one or two I think that were connected to the D line. So it feels like, man, the two deeps really sort of getting obliterated here at this one spot. And so I think that was part of it. I do think Rhule did a good job, though, of saying Nebraska's going to be really aggressive in the portal. I tried to warn you guys, is what he said, that this was going to happen. The roster numbers were like, 145 to 150 people. If you want to do the math, he was talking out all the numbers of stuff. And he was saying, basically you're taking a roster of 150 people. You got to get it down to like 70 to 75 because you got to make room, obviously, for the 20 signees. So that gets you to 90 to 95. And then you have space for, he said the numbers, 10 to 15 potential portal guys if you want to put a figure on how aggressive Nebraska might be in the portal. And so I understand it's got to be a really difficult time over there because we're talking about all the scholarship type guys that have left, but they're also dealing with these conversations that 10-18 on a Tuesday with a guy who we're not talking about, but his dream was to play football at Nebraska. And he's like looking for a landing spot. There's all these things happening. I mean, you've got so many bodies and just people whose, their future's sort of at stake and getting figured out over the next month. It does have to be a really stressful time over there.
Yeah. Going back to the original topic, do you think that this is a tryout for John Butler? Is like
I think it could be. Yeah, I think a little bit. I mean, because Rhule kind of said that. He said, I get a chance to watch sort of how he just ticks and how he operates a defense in a practice. And so I think he's taking note of that. And then, of course, there's that factor of they'll go play this bowl game, and it will be interesting, like what your personnel is, because there are some guys who won't be available that played some key snaps, like Butler and Bayer. But if you go and play pretty well, that would obviously, if there's not a decision made, have to increase chances. And if you go and give up 38 points, that how it's going to go. There'll be sort of a negative reaction then. So it is a tough spot, though, if you think about it. If that performance where you're dealing with moving parts and young guys maybe filtering into the too deep, and you still have to put a pretty good product out there to maybe enhance your chances for that job, if it's still a discussion at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it's from Rhule's perspective, it's actually not a bad spot if you think about it. Cause I mean, you basically get a 3-week runway to kind of see what this looks like with Butler running things. And obviously, like you said, it's a very different cast than what Nebraska was playing with during the season. But you get to see what that looks like. If it looks okay, maybe he's your guy. If maybe it doesn't, he's not your guy. And you're still sitting there in, right after Christmas and you still have time. The coaching carousel still has not spun really fast yet. You still have, NFL type guys out there too. And I don't know. I mean, you brought Phil Snow in just to kind of have a little look-see in November at what the operation looks like. I mean, what's his role in all this?
Yeah.
I mean, how much is he going to weigh in, or potentially help, or what could he potentially bring to the situation? So I don't think he has to make a quick decision. Like it feels like, for the most part, you're okay with your personnel. You're going to have to hire a defensive line coach that, the coordinator's probably going to do. But, aside from just having somebody in that chair to point to with potential transfers, I mean, there's not like this mad rush to get somebody in there and rush a hire, in my opinion.
No, I don't think he feels rushed at all. He said, when asked about the timetable, he said it's just about getting it right. And in some years or situations, that could be just a token answer to give and not really be true. But I think it could be in this case. Like you're saying, you laid it out why I don't think it has to be just urgent. You can see how John Butler sort of handles things. And how players react to him too, like you obviously get feedback and you get the pulse of your team. Like, does this guy drive guys? Do people respond to him the way you want? Tony White did do that well, I think.
Yeah,
I feel like players really wanted to play for him, and recruits did too. And so that's a key component here. Just that chemistry of like, this guy makes me want to run through a wall, as they say. And so you're seeing that. Maybe there's another guy or two you're interested in that's still coaching for something that matters. You got to consider that too. Like, that could be part of the timing. We remember, like, this is a different situation, but Glenn Thomas was a guy you wanted, and everybody kind of knew at one point he was going to be the QB's coach, but he was playing out his previous job with the Steelers, right, until the season ended. So all that stuff could be at play. And so if you think about it, no, it doesn't have to be named Thursday or anything like that. Next Thursday even. So yeah, they don't have to rush it, but you do got to get it right. It's you say you're going to play great defense, you better have a guy who inspires people running it. And D-line too. You got to have someone who can really recruit that spot and sort of has that it factor there.
We also, I mean, we actually reported in the middle of our last podcast, but Nebraska made official and Rhule confirmed the hiring of DeKel Schwartz Jr. As the wide receivers coach. Not a surprise. We kind of laid it out last time. A long background with Dana Holgorsen as a coach and a player. Was a guy that Matt Rhule said that Holgorsen really wanted in that room to bring along that wide receiver group. But what do you kind of make of the current offensive staff that Nebraska has? Because you've got Dana Holgorsen running things. Garrett McGuire is still around. I think is going to have some kind of a role if there's not a different, job out there for him. We learned that Marcus Satterfield is expected to hang around and coach tight ends unless he finds another opportunity. It's kind of it's a full group, but I mean, my sense is that group is far from a finished product going into. Well, I mean, after the bowl game, I feel like you're probably going to see some shuffling of chairs still.
Yeah, you definitely could. Now, what we were told yesterday is Dana likes the staff, and like Marcus Satterfield at this moment is on staff still and was planning on staying, and Dana was given the reins to do with the coaches what he wanted, and all those guys remain at the moment. I'd give some kudos to Garrett McGuire because I know there's a lot of questions about that he still has to answer as he's a young coach and building up. But I'll tell you one thing about him. I think he recruited really hard to the end, even amid this uncertainty. And the initial plan, Rhule said, was to have an inside receivers coach and an outside receivers coach with Shorts and McGuire. At least that's how it was laid out during the press conference. We'd heard that too. And so, I don't know, there's still a possibility for him to be on staff somewhere. And maybe he would think like, I'm a young coach. I'd like to see how Holgorsen operates and learn. And, I can branch out from this, but he might have other opportunities too. And so that's one to watch. But it is interesting that at this moment, the offensive staff sort of held in place, and the only one addition that Holgorsen wanted to really make, he said, I need Shorts. I trust this guy. We've mentioned this, worked with Tank Dell, who was a great receiver for the Houston Cougars, now at the Texans, round draft pick. Ja'Cory Barney's been compared to Tank Dell. So I think it was probably a smart move for Holgorsen to get a guy who can really get his message across to receivers at a position that has to play better, I think, more consistently than they did in 2024.
Yeah, and also just to kind of underline how badly Nebraska wanted him, I think, there was a pretty significant buyout attached to his contract, at least for a position coach.
That's interesting.
At Kentucky. Mark Stoops did not seem particularly pleased that that his buyout number didn't keep him from being poached.
That's a really interesting point for like a receivers coach to have that.
Yeah.
To me. It shows his value. I mean, he was a 30 under 30, as we have that feature on 247 Sports. He was one of those guys. He was actually, I can say this honestly, a name I knew of his name. Because I look at that list every year and I'm kind of intrigued by it. Before Nebraska hired him, usually if it's someone, you're kind of doing a Google search. I'm not too proud to admit that. Like, it's like, I don't know every like tight ends or wide receivers coach in the country. So sometimes you're just learning about a person as it pops up, or you hear about him when you're reporting. But he was a guy I'd actually, his name had surfaced before. So obviously he's valuable to Kentucky. And Kentucky had a veteran receiver who's produced good numbers go in the portal. So maybe that's one to watch, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good segue to the portal talk. Nebraska's had, 10 scholarship guys enter or say that they're going to enter when it opens on Monday. We kind of laid out the math problem that Nebraska's kind of facing right now. Obviously, there's certain guys you got to get down to a number, but there's guys that you would prefer not go in. Kind of lay out this month, because it's going to not get worse, but just the nature of college football now. There's going to be a lot of Nebraska connected guys going in the portal, and at other schools too. I mean, other schools are having to deal with the numbers too. It's going to be an interesting month.
Yeah, it's December 9th, right, when it officially starts.
Right.
And what you've been seeing so far, for the most part, are planned portal entries, guys who are, I'm going to be in there. They're letting it be known. So you're going to see more, obviously. The big thing to me is protecting some of those offensive skill guys. Like, you want to make sure, let's not be naive about things. There's tons of programs, I'm sure, that are interested in like Dylan Raiola. You want to make sure you're in a good place with him. And he's believing in the future. Certainly there's people that are going to be interested in Ja'Cory Barney. It used to be, Bruntz, 2 or 3 years ago, I wouldn't even mention names like this in a thing, because I felt like you just didn't want to talk about it. Like, it felt like it was supposed to be left over here, kind of. And it's just so like obvious now. Like, if a guy who's a young player produces a lot, he's going to be getting his phone buzzed by people, that I don't even hide from it anymore, from discussing it. So I'm always just, there's nothing that can surprise me anymore. I could legitimately say that there's not one name that could surprise me like in the portal. Like it's just like, I mean, it would be like there are bigger ones and smaller ones, but anything can happen anymore. And you're just like, okay, I guess something was afoot there, so we're on guard.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to be interesting because Nebraska has, I would not say has gone all in on the portal under Matt Rhule through 2 years. And he kind of mentioned that his thoughts on the portal have changed a little bit from where he was 2 years ago. And, Dana Holgerson was on the Nebraska signing day show. And he mentioned that he was expecting to bring in and not sign, but bring in between 20 and 30 guys for visits to just kind of kick the tires on and see if there's a fit there. Nebraska's going to have a lot more needs this time around because, I mean, this was an old roster in 2024. And you're going to be replacing a lot of starters. You're going to need some guys that can come in right away and add competition to groups. And I think you're going to see Nebraska, especially with the revenue sharing, which was covered yesterday, the NIL piece of it. I think Nebraska is going to go a little bit more elbows out in the portal than maybe what they've done, just to find guys that can that can come in and help right away.
I'm kind of thinking of this on the fly. So I'd have to iron out this thought a little bit. The 105 rule, for the most part, I've kind of been down on. I think Rhule has been down on. You wish it was 120. It is what it is, though. And because it is there, it might force Rhule's hand in a way that can be beneficial, where you do have to you had to adjust your sort of methods, a little bit. He came in here and he said this yesterday, and he did not want to run people off, just run them off of scholarships, and that Nebraska had room to have 140 some people over there. Well, now the 105 has done that for you. It's, it's hard, but in a way, some guys are just going to see the writing on the wall and they're going to get out. And there's some guys who are good players, but are they great players? Are they first team, second team, whatever you think it takes to be elite players? You do have to ask yourself that. We can get attached, and I definitely am this way, to guys who have been in this program 4 or 5 years, and they're good by our standards and our bubble of within the roster. We do our most indispensable list, and it's oh, they can't lose this guy, Well, there's a lot of talent out there, and you got to step back sometimes and say they went 6-6. Beyond a few people, nobody is irreplaceable, So while beyond a few, now you don't want to just get decimated at certain position groups, and that's why I went, the D-line thing. You do want to have enough foundation there. That you can add maybe 2 big pieces and you've got these other parts. So that's where you worry a little bit, because there is some work to do, I think, on that in the trenches. But I have an open mind about it. It's going to be a dramatic roster flip, and they're also going to need some activity from true freshmen like that. I'm not saying to play right away, but I sense that in my interviews more than ever. Those guys, your Tyson Terry's, your Christian Jones type guys, they're I know I need to kind of be a part of it some way, somehow. That doesn't mean you're starting or whatever, but that you have to make your name known and be a useful spot on that 105. And you can't just necessarily be this behind the scenes guy who's going to redshirt. Those days are over, I think.
Yeah, no, I think there's much more of a sense of urgency now for guys to get on the field earlier. And your point's an interesting one, too, and especially in light of, the all-conference stuff that came out this week, too. I mean, people would argue that Ty Robinson had a pretty damn good year. And he's a third-team all Big Ten guy and the only guy that's not honorable mention on that list. I mean, Nebraska needs to find more dudes They need more. They need more of those eraser type guys where, for lack of a better example, you need more Amir Abdullahs. You need a guy that when you need a play made is going to go make a play. And that's, I think, what they're going to be looking for in the portal. I mean, they just don't have the luxury of kind of dilly-dallying with it and getting guys that might help them. I mean, it needs to be much more of like, we're going to go in there. These are the guys we're going to get, and they need to show up on Saturdays in the fall, because you just don't have with the 105. I mean, you're going to have some guys that are more, developmental type pieces that you're bringing along, but there's much more pressure to hit on guys that you're bringing in, especially out of the portal, which is more of a talent infusion than anything else.
Yeah. It is an interesting thing, though. I mean, because you got to be careful with it, because like Ty was the only guy on the 3 all Big Ten teams. And yet, there's some of that stuff is based off of like reputation. Like Iowa had like 2 or 3 O linemen that are like top.
Yeah.
And we watched the game last Friday up close.
5 weeks ago.
Nebraska's D-line kicked their ass for most of that game. Like, I'm not like, I want to give the guys their props who are going out. One play on a play where Nebraska blew it up themselves was a big play. Iowa won the game, so the Iowa linebacker was allowed to set the narrative and all that stuff, and that's fine. That's what happens. But Iowa was not overly fired up by that handshake thing for the first half when they had 20 yards of offense and all that. My point is, Nebraska's defensive line had some guys that were very much, sturdy, like Big Ten players that are going to have to be replaced. And so you balance that, like, hey, they only won 5 or 6 games the last few years. You definitely got to upgrade, but there were certain spots where they kind of were on the right track with what you need in this league. And so you got to refill that. So that's going to be a big question to me, is in the trenches, if you can do that.
No doubt. So portal officially opens on the 9th. Matt Rhule said that they're planning on hosting portal guys basically the following weekend, whenever they're going to be rolling through bowl practices. So December is going to be really off and running once that happens. Anything else from yesterday that kind of stood out? I mean, I'm just trying to think if there's anything we missed, because there was a lot to kind of wrap your head around.
Well, I think you hit on a lot of the main ones. That there is the shift in Rhule's thinking, and he said it has over the last year on the portal was probably the most interesting thing right now. And Nebraska does feel, going back to this, with the revenue sharing upwards of 20 million, north of that figure, and everything else, that it can be really competitive. And so, he did a good job of saying, this is the new normal, and we're going to flourish in the new normal. We'll see. But I think he had a good press conference in setting up, like, this is how it is. I'm adapting to it, and we're going to adapt, and we're going to make it work. So it's going to, the first 2 days or so of this week were sort of intense with the news cycle, but I think next week is going to have a day or two like that too. Not coordinator related, obviously, so that added a whole other element. But there is going to be like some portal day where we're probably writing about 5 or 6 guys. It's just bound to happen.
You like New York in December?
Never been. I guess so. If it's better than nothing, right? That it's looking like pinstripe, isn't it?
It's feeling awfully pinstripey. Nebraska going to New York to face a 5-7 Boston College team. How would you feel about that?
I just assume Boston College always plays in that game. I think I saw him play one time when I was like looked up from writing at my kitchen table on a noon on December 27th one year, and I've always just believed that Boston College is in that game.
Yeah,
could Syracuse be in it?
They could be in it. Rutgers. I always assume Rutgers always kind of had a standing date, like standing tea time in late December in the Pinstripe Bowl.
Yeah. Where's Rutgers going?
I don't even.
We don't need to get into that. Yeah. That's when you're that's a sicko's question right there.
Yeah.
If I ever heard one.
Yeah.
Although Shiano's boys did get it together near the end. I don't want to dog on them. They had a nice finish.
Yeah. Well, it's too bad that it's looking like you won't get Ethan Kalkmanis in the Yankee Stadium in the doing that. Yeah.
Nebraska kind of botched it. They did botch it because they were going to go to the ReliaQuest Bowl, I think. And
Michigan screwed it up too. They did all Ryan Day had to do was hold court, and everybody would have just gone to their bowl games where they were supposed to. And lo and behold,
you should write a letter of all the things that Ryan Day is dealing with the Heat right now. Write a letter from Nebraska of how he to him of, hey buddy, I could be in Nashville.
I do a live stream from a 23-degree Yankee Stadium press box, just pissed off at Ryan Day. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Well, we're getting used to there's no heat in my house at the moment. So I'm like this is like my practice for that. So
well, I don't think we have anything else to hit on. You probably need to start burning media guides, I guess, at this point for warmth. So we'll get out on that. Nebraska learns its bowl destination on Sunday. We'll have plenty of coverage from that. Nebraska's going to practice 4 times for the bowl game once they have an opponent next week. There's going to be portal talk. There's going to be guys entering the portal, Nebraska hosting portal guys, probably some coordinator talk too. So keep it locked on Husker247. It's going to be a busy time over there. Good time to hop on board. And we'll be back with some podcasts next week, kind of laying out National Signing Day. We need to do that, a little bit of that, but also just kind of making sense of everything that's going to go on in the next week. So for Brian Christopherson, I'm Michael Bruntz. Thanks for listening.